The sky above the ancient Earth cracked open in a blaze of unnatural fire, not from the sun, nor from lightning, but from something greater, something foreign. As clouds were pulled apart like cloth ripped at the seams, a thunderous roar echoed across the untouched oceans of the young planet. Beneath the vast dome of the heavens, a blinding silver arc streaked across the sky, trailing radiant flames that refused to die even as they descended. The craft broke through the atmosphere with violent elegance, shimmering with an otherworldly brilliance. It wasn't a meteor. It moved with intent, an intelligence behind the motion. Massive, circular, and engraved with radiant glyphs pulsing in rhythmic light, the ship did not fall. It landed, controlled, precise, purposeful. The ocean boiled beneath it as the craft hovered momentarily above the surface before descending with a deafening hiss. The waters surged away, revealing scorched earth beneath the sea floor. From above, it might have looked like a god had branded the earth with its seal. Inside, the passengers remained composed. Tall beings cloaked in black and gold stood at crystal consoles, their elongated skulls crowned with metallic headpieces that glowed faintly with lines of living code. Their eyes were large, dark pools, voids filled with purpose and memory. These were not explorers, these were envoys, engineers of destiny, warriors of necessity. The Anunnaki had arrived. Enki, the chief scientist and commander of the mission, stepped forward to the viewing glass. His gaze was steady as he looked out at this new world, a world bursting with promise, yet plagued with primitive chaos. His fingers, slender and long, danced across the console as he activated the primary scanners. The landscape unfolded before them. Endless mountains, jungles thick with unclassified life, rivers that carved through the continents like veins of an emerging beast. But their mission was not exploration. It was extraction, gold, the lifeblood of their dying planet, Nibiru. A mineral needed to repair the rift in their atmospheric shield, a shield which had begun to falter, exposing their cities to lethal cosmic rays and climate collapse. Gold, rare and sacred, was Earth's offering, or rather it would become one. Another Anunnaki, Ninhursag, stepped forward from the central chamber. Her expression was unreadable, stoic, yet tinged with a distant sorrow. She had once warned the Council of the consequences of genetic violation, but now there was no room for moral hesitation. If Nibiru were to survive, they had to act swiftly. Earth was rich, but time was poor. As the ship settled and sealed itself into the terrain like a monument from another reality, the first expedition crew disembarked. Their feet met Earth for the first time. The gravity was lighter, the air dense, alien to their lungs but manageable. The surrounding flora vibrated in quiet symphony, aware of the change in the natural order. Animals fled, insects stilled, time itself seemed to pause. Then came first contact. They found them near a shallow valley, creatures covered in coarse hair, hunched and primitive yet curious. Homo erectus, as they would later be labeled. They moved in small groups, communicated with grunts and gestures, their dark eyes reflecting firelight and confusion. The Anunnaki did not approach them with weapons. They stood in silence, watching, recording. The primates mirrored them, unsure whether to run or kneel. One young male crept forward, drawn by the shimmer of Enki's robes. His fingers reached out hesitantly. The moment they touched, skin against ancient fabric, a pulse traveled through both species. Enki lowered himself slightly, placing his hand upon the creature's chest. He could feel the beating heart, rapid and unsteady. There was potential here, not for war, but for creation, for transformation. Later, back aboard the ship, the genetic analysis was undeniable. These beings, though crude, bore the DNA of bipedal adaptability, communal instinct, and cognitive acceleration. With modification, they could serve. They could mine, they could build. "We do not have the numbers," Enki said to the gathering of Anunnaki on the upper deck. beneath the great dome that displayed Nibiru's distant orbit. "Our own cannot toil for gold in these conditions forever," added Enlil, his brother and counterpart in command. "Our people rebel. Our workers burn with anger. We must create new labor." "We will modify them," Ninhursag whispered. "From the dust of this earth, we will make a new being." But before they began, they had to build the infrastructure, and so Eridu was born, the first city, a base of operations carved from the rock and framed with their shimmering tools. Towers of metal rose from the land, like crystals forced from the soil. Giant landing pads were etched into the deserts. Enormous dig sites were plotted across what would one day be Mesopotamia. The earth was now a workshop of the gods. And yet, even as the mission began, some Anunnaki looked upon humanity with unease. For within the primitive frames of the early earth dwellers something flickered, a spark, an intelligence embryonic and untamed. They were not blank slates, they were dreamers. They feared, yes, but they also wondered. They watched the skies as though they remembered. Enki, ever the visionary, stood again at the edge of the cliff outside Eridu. The stars shimmered above, and he thought not of Nibiru but of Earth's future. Would these creatures worship them as gods, or would they rise up against their makers? He pressed a hand to the soil, now tinged with stardust. "The seed is planted," he murmured. Behind him the great ship rose into the air again, headed toward what would later be called the place of crossing, a waypoint in the stars between Earth and Mars. The mission had begun, but destiny, as always, had plans of its own. The crimson sun cast long shadows over the scorched plains of what would one day be known as Mesopotamia. In the newly established settlement of Eridu, the first city of the gods, structures unlike anything Earth had ever known began to rise. Towers of gleaming alloy, hovering platforms, massive energy pylons that crackled with blue light. The Anunnaki had wasted no time. Under the direction of Enki, their mission commander and master geneticist, a grand initiative unfolded. Satellites were launched into the upper atmosphere to scan for subterranean gold veins. Drones, shaped like winged discs, roamed the skies, marking deposits deep within the Earth's crust. Once the locations were confirmed, massive drills, unlike anything seen again until modern times, descended from orbit. These were Lahmu-class diggers, ancient machines with intelligence coded into their very metal, capable of cutting through solid rock like water. The gold was plentiful, but it came at a cost. Each mining colony, Bad Tabira, Shurupak, and Larak, was built beside rivers or lakes to harness water for cooling the drill cores. Robotic arms moved ceaselessly, scooping up rock and dust, sifting through the earth to separate gold from debris. Storage vaults of unimaginable scale held the glittering prize before it was sent skyward to Nana Station, the orbital refinery hub, where it was processed and shipped back to Nibiru. Yet not all was efficient. Not all was flawless. The mines were hot, volatile, and filled with hazards. Gas pockets would erupt without warning. Magnetic fields destabilized machinery. And worst of all, the Anunnaki themselves were the laborers. The Council on Nibiru had expected automation to handle the task. But Earth, ever defiant, had its own rules. The machines were fragile under the constant tremors and chemical chaos. And so the Anunnaki, noble sons of Nibiru, toiled. They descended into the mines in shifts, their shimmering garments replaced with crude exosuits, powered by uranium crystals and cooled with liquid metal coils. Once scientists, physicians, and navigators, they now broke stone and harvested ore like primitive slaves. It was a humiliation that festered. In the twilight of the 7th working year, by Earth's reckoning, some 80 Earth years had passed. A murmur began to spread among the labor camps. The grumbles turned into whispers, then chants. Enlil, the warlord and commander of Earth's military affairs, dismissed them as exhaustion-induced delusions. But Enki knew better. In the northern mining complex of Abzu, the rebellion began. The revolt was not loud, it was not immediate. It began with refusals, entire squads that failed to report. Food supplies left untouched, tools laid down in neat rows, untouched and unmanned. When the orbital supervisors activated discipline protocols, the Anunnaki workers simply stood still, unblinking, daring the machines to enforce what their minds could no longer tolerate. When Enlil arrived, wrath in his voice and lightning in his eyes, the workers confronted him. Their leader, Anzu, stepped forward. His once pristine robes were stained with dust and sweat. He did not kneel. "We are gods," Anzu said, his voice echoing in the silent compound. "We did not cross stars to become beasts of burden." Enlil, seething, raised his hand to strike, but Enki intervened. "Let them speak," he said. What followed was the declaration of a new idea, one that would shake the course of Earth's history. The rebellion was not just a refusal to labor, it was a cry for creation, a need for a new species, a servant race, a being formed from the flesh of Earth, yet imbued with the breath of the stars. "You want your gold," Anzu growled. "Then make a creature that will bleed for it." The idea, though treacherous, was genius. Enki had considered it before, in passing, genetic splicing between the Earth creatures and Anunnaki DNA. The Homo erectus they had encountered years ago had shown remarkable potential. What if they were reshaped? What if they were reborn? Enlil protested, but the council on Nibiru, desperate for the continued flow of gold, gave their silent blessing. They would not involve themselves in the dirty ethics of creation. They only wanted results. And so the rebellion became a genesis. Enki retreated to his genetic laboratories, hidden beneath the temple complex in Eridu. Alongside his half-sister, the great geneticist Nanhursag, he began his work, mixing the clay of the earth with the blood of the stars. The scream of rebellion had become the whisper of new life. And in the shadow of the mines, where sweat and rage had once poured freely from the gods themselves, there would soon come the first true earthling. They would name him Adamu, and he would not be the last. The chamber of decision was dimly lit, carved into the heart of a mountain that echoed with the soft thrum of machines far older than any Earth civilization would know. Crystalline panels lined the walls, displaying pulsating sequences of DNA strands, rotating helixes interwoven with glowing annotations in the ancient tongue of Nibiru. Enki stood before the central table, his fingers clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed on the sequence floating in mid-air. "It's not enough to take their form and amplify it," he said quietly. "Their skull is too small, language is absent, dexterity limited. We must rewire thought itself." Across from him, Ninhursag leaned forward, her brow furrowed, the soft glow of the gene matrix illuminating the golden threads in her braids. "You mean to rewrite what evolution has crafted over eons," she said. "To make them more than they are, and less. They'll never be truly us, and they'll never be truly them again." "They don't need to be us," Enlil said from the side, his voice clipped with impatience. "They only need to obey." "You would create a slave," Ninhursag snapped. "We need miners," Enlil countered. "The rebellion has brought extraction to a halt. If we do not send gold shipments, Nibiru will suffer. Your ideals mean nothing if our world collapses." Enki stepped forward, his fingers tracing the image of the Adamu sequence, the prototype. "I propose a compromise," he said. "A hybrid. Their body, our guidance. We splice their genome with Anunnaki mitochondrial strands, neural upgrades, hormonal dampeners to dull aggression, and we insert the language matrix from the MIE tablets. They'll speak, understand orders, learn and feel," Ninhursag added. "You cannot give them understanding and deny them consciousness. You will create suffering." Silence filled the room. "Do it," Enlil said. "We do not need a philosopher in the mines." Later, in the laboratory of clay and code, the process began. A clear tank filled with pale blue fluid pulsed softly, held in suspension by anti-gravity coils. Inside, a human form slowly took shape, its skull more elongated than natural, the fingers longer, the joints reinforced with carbon-laced cartilage. Genes from Homo erectus were fused with the divine strands of the Anunnaki. Enki himself handled the encoding, his hands guided by both science and something deeper, something reverent. Ninhursag stood beside him, palms trembling. "It breathes," she whispered. "Not yet," Enki said. She turned to the side console. "Inject the mitochondrial catalysts. Begin neurological stimulation." Lights flared across the control panel. The figure in the tank convulsed. Once, twice, then stilled. "Brainwave activity," announced Isimud, Enki's chief assistant. "Stable, cortex forming, language centers active." The being opened its eyes. It looked up at them, not with fear, not with blankness, but with awareness, recognition, and sorrow. Weeks later, the new workers were put to task. They were strong, tireless, and obedient. They learned quickly, adapted to tools, communicated through simple but structured language. Gold output tripled. The Anunnaki returned to their posts in orbit and on the surface, relieved. But not all creations were equal. Some of the hybrids, those closest to Anunnaki blood, grew beyond their intended purpose. They were larger, smarter, unwilling to remain in the mines. Some took Anunnaki mates, others fled into the highlands. These became known as the Nephilim. They were not human. They were not Anunnaki. They were something new, and they were watching. The golden discs descended from the sky, casting long shadows over the flat plains of the Fertile Crescent. Where once there was dust and silence, now rose the vibration of divine intent. Enlil stood atop the ziggurat's highest platform, arms crossed behind his back, his silver and indigo robe flickering in the desert light. Below him, the first humans, once miners, now servants, artisans, scribes, gathered in disciplined rows, their eyes wide with reverence. "This," he said, voice low but powerful, "is how order begins." The Anunnaki did not merely create humans to dig. Once the gold flowed steady and rebellion was quelled, they looked upon their hybrid children and saw potential. They had given them breath. Now they would give them structure. At the mouth of the Euphrates, they founded Eridu, the first true city. More followed: Ur, Nippur, Lagash, Kish. Each city was placed with intention, atop energy points and ancient fault lines that pulsed with the living memory of the earth. And each had a king, not chosen by the people, but appointed by the gods. "These are not rulers," Enki once told Ninhursag as they observed the coronation of Alulim, the first Sumerian king. "They are custodians of divine will." The kings were Anunnaki trained, taught to read the sacred tablets, shown how to invoke the calendars, groomed to be not just leaders, but intermediaries between gods and mortals. They lived in palaces patterned after the star charts of Nibiru and ruled by edicts dictated from the sky. In Nippur, the center of divine administration, the tablets of destiny were stored, slabs of glowing crystal that held the decrees of cosmic law. It was here the Anunnaki introduced writing to mankind, not as a tool for poetry or emotion, but for administration. Cuneiform, carved into clay with sharpened reeds, was born. "We must teach them to record," said Isimud, Enki's aide. "If memory lives only in voice, it is vulnerable. In tablets, it endures." So scribes were trained. Young men selected from the temple classes, taught to copy star movements, ration records, lists of kings. And from this sprang something even greater: law. The first legal codes, long before Hammurabi, were dictated by Enlil himself. Crimes were listed, consequences prescribed. Theft, adultery, murder, each line etched in stone, each judgment said to be from the gods. What of justice? Ninhursag had asked once. Enlil's reply was simple. Justice is obedience. Monumental structures rose from the earth like mountains born in days. The ziggurats, layered towers of mud, brick and stone, pointed skyward. They were not merely temples, they were beacons, landing sites, resonance points for interplanetary communication. Every corner of each city faced a celestial coordinate. The Anunnaki taught geometry not as abstraction, but as sacred alignment. And the stars, Enki said to his apprentice Lugal, are your true map. Build your walls according to Orion's belt. Let Venus dictate your planting. Mars shall govern your gates. In the dark of the temples, secret schools formed. Hidden from the laborers, these were centers of divine knowledge, where the priests were trained in alchemy, metallurgy, and the music of the spheres. The sacred language was never spoken aloud. It was chanted in low tones, harmonic vibrations that echoed the frequency of creation itself. Each city-state was assigned a god. Eridu belonged to Enki, the wise and patient. Uruk to Inanna, the fierce and beautiful. Kish to Ninurta, the war tactician. Ur to Nannar, the moon gazer and judge of time. Kings bowed to them, festivals were held in their honor, and every law was said to flow from their invisible hand. But not all gods agreed, and not all kings remained loyal. Some began to question the purpose of divine rule, others attempted to wield the gods' own symbols against them. One king, Etana, even sought the secret of immortality, climbing into the sky on a griffin-like craft, demanding audience with the heavens. He did not return. But the Anunnaki were watching, always. For every tower built, they whispered a rule. For every law scribed, they offered a price. And for every kingdom that rose too high, they reminded mankind who had taught them how to build. The sun dipped low behind the ziggurat of Uruk, casting a golden halo around its stepped silhouette. A hush fell over the great plaza as the high priestess of Inanna, veiled in shimmering linen, approached the altar with a procession of drummers and incense bearers behind her. Smoke curled upward from the fire basin, twisting into the evening air like a serpent of flame. Children watched wide-eyed. Merchants paused their scales. Even the guards at the city gate knelt as she raised her hands to the sky. "O Inanna," she chanted, "Queen of the heavens, rider of the storm cloud, who gave us the measure of time and the seed of wisdom." In the crowd, an old storyteller sat with 3 young boys, his voice low and reverent. "They came from the stars," he whispered, "with eyes like molten silver and hands that shaped lightning. They taught us to dig wells, to bake bricks, to trace the movement of the stars. And in return, we offered them song, sacrifice, and memory." One of the boys looked up, frowning. "But they're not here now." The storyteller smiled. "They never left. Look at your bread, baked in ovens they designed. Your writing, carved in a script they taught us. Every full moon when the waters rise, it is Nanna's blessing. Every harvest when the fields overflow, it is Enki's hand." Behind them, inside the temple's inner chamber, priests arranged clay tablets on gilded shelves. Some told of medicinal herbs and planetary alignments. Others, older, cracked from time, spoke of sky chariots and flaming swords, of giants that walked beside man in the days before memory. A scribe leaned in close to the high priest, voice low. "Shall I record today's ritual under the name of the queen herself?" The priest nodded. "Yes, but change nothing of her titles. She is not only Inanna, she is Ishtar in the west, Astarte in the north. Let her names live on however they must." It was in moments like this that mythology was born. One generation passed stories to the next. The Anunnaki's deeds, once recorded fact, blurred with time, until memory became reverence, reverence became ritual, and ritual became religion. Enlil became the god of storms, bearing the tablets of fate in his hands. Enki, with his flowing robes and river-fed mind, became Ea, the bringer of wisdom and protector of mankind. Nin-Hursag, with soil under her nails and sorrow in her eyes, was remembered as the Earth Mother. Namu, Isis, Gaia. Their tools became relics. A glowing rod became a divine scepter. A flight suit became wings. A helmet became a crown of stars. And their technology, indistinguishable from magic. In the temples, music played that mimicked the tones once used to heal or to command. Geometry, once taught to align with the heavens, became sacred shapes, etched into tombs and woven into priestly garments. The triangle, the spiral, the eye. A council of scholars gathered in Eridu, now a shadow of its former glory, to debate the origins of these teachings. Did gods descend to shape man? One asked. Or did men rise to meet gods, and in doing so forget their place? Asked another. Only one voice, an old archivist with sand in his beard, replied with certainty. They came, they ruled, they departed, but they left their words behind. And if you listen, truly listen, you can still hear them in the chants of the temples, in the sigh of the river, in the turning of the stars. That night, as the moon rose over the Euphrates and the torches flickered in the sacred courtyards, mankind dreamed dreams not entirely their own, and the gods, watching from afar or from beneath the earth, smiled. The skies above Uruk had darkened, the heavy clouds swirling like the final breaths of a storm. The hum of the ziggurat's sacred drumbeat faded as the winds carried whispers across the city's streets. In the temple, High Priestess Ninlil stood with her arms raised, her eyes fixed upon the heavens. The temple's bells began to toll, their deep, resonant sound echoing through the vast expanse of the city, summoning the people to witness the moment of departure. For days, the Anunnaki had prepared. Their shining vessels, like great stars fallen from the sky, stood silent at the outskirts of the city, their engines humming in a low frequency that made the earth itself shudder. The kings, those direct descendants of the gods, gathered with their royal courts, unsure whether they were witnessing an ending or a beginning. "This is it," said Gimil, the high priest of Nippur, his voice trembling. "The gods leave us. Their time among us is done." Enlil, clad in a robe woven with constellations, approached the royal council, his eyes unreadable. Behind him, Enki stood, his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of the young king of Uruk, a direct descendant of the godly bloodline. "Do you feel it, my son?" Enki whispered to the king, his tone warm yet distant. "The winds are changing. We depart, but our mark is on your world. The seed has been sown." The king's eyes were wide with a mix of awe and confusion. "Why now? Why leave us?" Enki smiled faintly, the sorrow in his eyes betraying his words. "We came to lay the foundation, to share knowledge, to help guide your species. But our time here has come to an end. Your kind must now walk your path alone. You are our legacy. The knowledge we gave you, the laws we passed down, they will endure. But your destiny is yours to shape." As the words echoed through the air, the ground trembled once more, this time more forcefully, as if the earth itself was preparing to release its divine visitors. From the distant horizon, a dark shape began to rise, an enormous ship shimmering with the metallic sheen of the cosmos. The Anunnaki were preparing to depart, to return to the heavens from which they had come. "Watch carefully," Enki said softly, motioning toward the ascending vessel. "What you see now will be the last glimpse of us in the flesh, but our influence will remain forever." The ship's engines roared to life, sending a pulse of energy that briefly illuminated the entire city. The high priests and royal families knelt, their faces pressed to the earth in reverence, for they knew that they were witnessing the end of an era, the final departure of the gods. The great starship ascended slowly, its massive shape growing smaller against the backdrop of the cloud-covered sky. As it disappeared into the heavens, a deep silence fell over the land, broken only by the soft murmur of wind and the distant cries of those who had once been servants of the gods. In the days that followed, a strange sense of loss swept through the cities. The people, having once looked to the heavens for guidance, now turned to each other. Kings, though still born of divine blood, could no longer claim direct connection to the gods. Temples that had once echoed with divine commands now stood as empty, hollow places of worship, their priests wandering in a haze of uncertainty. The Anunnaki had left their marks, but their departure left the world with more questions than answers. The great ziggurats stood as monuments to a time of divine rule, but their purpose was now unclear. The gold mines in the distant mountains, once the source of the gods' wealth and power, lay abandoned. The cities that had flourished under divine influence began to falter, their kings struggling to hold on to the old ways of governance. In the temple of Nibiru, the last of the ancient tablets were locked away, their meanings now cryptic and veiled in mystery. Some spoke of a coming time when the gods would return, while others simply told the stories of the days before their departure. The scribes, once tasked with recording the will of the gods, now turned to recording the myths and legends that were slowly growing around the Anunnaki. The stories of their arrival, their rule, and their sudden departure began to weave into the fabric of Sumerian belief. And then, in the quiet of the night, the first whispers began to circulate. "Perhaps they will return," said one merchant to another in the marketplace. "The gods did not leave entirely. Perhaps they left us with a secret, a clue to bring them back." "Or perhaps," said a woman at the well, "we are meant to walk alone now, to find our own path. The gods gave us everything, our cities, our laws, our wisdom. It is up to us now to carry that legacy." As the seasons passed, the great cities of Sumer continued to grow, but they were no longer the centers of divine rule they had once been. The temples remained, but their fires burned dimmer, their rituals more fragmented. The kings, now mortal, turned their gaze inward, toward the land and the people, seeking answers in ways the Anunnaki had never taught them. In the distant mountains, where the Anunnaki had once mined the earth for gold, the winds whispered of forgotten secrets. Beneath the earth, in long-forgotten chambers, the remnants of their technology lay dormant, silent witnesses to an age of gods, an age now passed into myth. The Anunnaki had gone, but their legacy remained, etched into the stones of the ziggurats, the cuneiform tablets, and the hearts of the people. And as the centuries unfurled, their stories would evolve, woven into the tapestry of human history, the divine visitors from the stars fading into legend, their true nature concealed by the sands of time. And so, the mystery of the gods remained, an enigma that would echo across the ages, waiting to be uncovered by those who sought the truth. In the heart of the Iraqi desert, beneath the layers of shifting sand and ancient stone, a team of archaeologists stood in awe, their hands trembling as they uncovered something unimaginable. It was a shard of metal, weathered by millennia, but still gleaming faintly under the harsh sunlight. The artifact, half buried in a forgotten ruin, had resisted the erosion of time in a way nothing from Earth should. Its smooth metallic surface bore markings that seemed foreign, symbols no known civilization had ever used. Dr. Eleanor Hayes, an archaeologist renowned for her work on ancient Mesopotamian cultures, crouched down, wiping the dust from the artifact with her gloved hand. The object was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was not merely a relic of a past age. It was something more. The symbols etched into the metal matched descriptions from ancient Sumerian texts. But these texts, she had always believed, were nothing more than myth, fanciful stories woven by early humans to explain the unexplainable. But now, standing before her, was proof that those stories had roots far deeper and far stranger than anyone could have imagined. "Could it be?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind that whipped through the excavation site. Could this be the truth they spoke of? The team gathered around her, their faces a mix of disbelief and awe. They had spent years digging through ruins, uncovering pottery, inscriptions and bones, but nothing like this. The metal shard seemed to hum with a strange energy, as though it had been waiting for them to find it. The symbols etched into its surface had been seen in the ancient texts, the same symbols used to describe the gods who had come from the heavens, the Anunnaki. Legends spoke of their arrival from a distant planet, their mastery of technologies far beyond anything human civilizations had known. Now, the physical evidence of their existence, of their influence, was before them. The discovery sparked a firestorm of debate that spread across the globe, igniting the world's fascination with its origins. Was this an ancient hoax, a piece of alien technology left behind by beings who had once walked the earth and shared their wisdom with humanity? Or was it simply an artifact of unknown origins that defied explanation? In the months that followed, media outlets clamored for a voice, and scientists from across the world convened in conferences, presenting their theories, some cautious, others far bolder. Skeptics insisted that the artifact was simply the product of early human craftsmanship, perhaps inspired by myths or unrecorded cultural exchange. But for many, this was more than just an object. It was a key, a doorway into understanding the origins of human civilization. Dr. Hayes, now at the center of the controversy, found herself at the forefront of a revolution in archaeological thinking. The debates were intense. Scholars who had long adhered to conventional theories of human evolution, who believed that mankind had risen from the dust without the help of external influences, now had to confront evidence that suggested otherwise. The implications were staggering. "These aren't just myths," Dr. Hayes argued at a televised symposium, her voice steady yet resolute. The Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, they all spoke of beings who came from the heavens, who brought knowledge and technology. This object, this artifact, is proof that we are not simply the products of our ancestors, but of something far more profound, something that reached across the stars to shape the very course of our civilization. Her words were met with mixed reactions. Some in the audience were quick to dismiss her claims as fantasy, but others, those who had long suspected that there was more to humanity's history than met the eye, listened intently, their minds racing with possibilities. Had the Anunnaki truly walked among the first human civilizations? Had they guided humanity's rise from primitive tribes to complex societies, and then disappeared, leaving behind only traces of their existence, remnants of their advanced technology and the myths they had inspired? Across the world, the discovery sent ripples through society. Ancient astronaut theorists, who had long posited that extraterrestrial beings had visited Earth in antiquity, saw the artifact as validation of their ideas. They were quick to point to the stories from cultures around the globe, stories of gods descending from the sky of fire and lightning of miracles that defied the laws of nature, as evidence that the ancient gods were in fact extraterrestrial visitors. Meanwhile, theologians and religious scholars wrestled with the implications of the find. The notion of divine beings descending to Earth was not new to many religious traditions, but the idea that these gods were in fact beings from another world, creatures of flesh and blood who had come to teach and perhaps to manipulate humanity, was a concept that challenged the very foundations of faith. Yet it was the common people, the ordinary citizens of the world, who found themselves most affected by the discovery. For them, the ancient legends of gods descending from the heavens had always been just that, legends. But now, with this artifact in hand, those stories seemed closer to reality than ever before. What did it mean for humanity's place in the universe? Were we the descendants of an ancient race of gods? Or were we merely the offspring of beings from another world who had left us to forge our own path? The debate raged on, with no clear resolution in sight. New excavations were launched at ancient sites across Mesopotamia, hoping to uncover more clues that might shed light on the mystery of the Anunnaki and their role in human history. In laboratories, scientists scrambled to analyze the artifact, trying to determine its composition, its origin, and how it might have been created. Was it possible that the Anunnaki had left behind more than just their myths? Had they left behind technologies that could advance human civilization in ways previously unimaginable? But as the years passed, the mystery only deepened. Every discovery seemed to raise more questions than answers. The more the world learned about the Anunnaki, the more elusive their true purpose remained. Were they gods? Or were they something else entirely? Beings of advanced technology who had shaped the course of human evolution for their own purposes? For Dr. Hayes, the discovery was both an answer and a question. She had uncovered the first tangible evidence of the Anunnaki's existence, but it had only served to raise more profound and troubling questions. In the end, the artifact was a reminder that humanity's story was far from complete. There were still mysteries waiting to be uncovered, waiting to be understood. And in the quiet of her office, late into the night, Dr. Hayes couldn't help but wonder, what secrets lay buried beneath the earth, just waiting to be discovered? As the years went by, the world continued to grapple with the discovery of the artifact. Dr. Hayes and her colleagues never stopped their work, delving deeper into the ruins of ancient civilizations, seeking more clues to unravel the mysteries that had once been confined to the realm of myth. The artifact, which had sparked a global debate, became a symbol of humanity's relentless pursuit of truth. Yet, for all the progress made, the questions lingered, unanswered and enigmatic. Was humanity truly the creation of beings from another world? Were the Anunnaki gods, or were they something entirely different, extraterrestrial visitors, advanced beings who had shaped the very foundation of human civilization for reasons unknown? And if they had once walked among us, what happened to them? Where did they go, and why did they leave behind only their influence, their technologies and their stories? Despite the advancements in technology and the countless excavations that followed, the truth remained elusive. Some believed that humanity was not meant to know everything, that the answers to these questions lay beyond our reach, hidden in the annals of time and space. Others were certain that the answers were out there, just waiting to be uncovered, and that the key to humanity's future lay in understanding its distant past. For Dr. Hayes, the journey was both a personal and academic one. What had started as a simple excavation had transformed into a lifelong quest, one that had led her down paths she never could have imagined. The artifact, though a single piece in a vast puzzle, had changed her life forever. She had seen what others only dreamed of, proof that the ancient stories of gods and extraterrestrial visitors were not just fabrications, but were rooted in something real, something tangible. But in the end, perhaps the most profound realization came not from the artifacts or the ancient texts, but from the understanding that humanity's place in the universe was far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. The discovery of the Anunnaki was just one chapter in the story of Earth and its inhabitants, one small piece of a much larger, more mysterious picture. As the world looked toward the stars, the questions remained, hanging like a veil over humanity's future. Would we ever truly understand our origins? Could we ever uncover the full extent of the Anunnaki's legacy? Or would the answers forever remain just beyond our reach, locked away in the forgotten corners of time. In the silence of the excavation site, as the sun set over the desert, the winds whispered a single truth. The journey was far from over. The answers were out there, waiting. And with each new discovery, the story of humanity's past and its future moved one step closer to being told.